Hey guys, and welcome back to the Courageous Nerd YouTube channel. I'm Connor, and joining me today is Taylor Gray to chat all about playing Ezra Bridger on Star Wars Rebels, as well as his new film Night Night, directed by Niki Koss. Quite unusually compared to some of our other videos, this one has got slight audio issues throughout, but please don't let that detract from your enjoyment of the interview. If you enjoyed this interview or others on the channel, please be sure to like and subscribe. So welcome, Taylor, and thank you for taking the time to chat with me today.
Hi, thank you so much for having me on.
Oh, absolutely. And of course, we'll mainly be talking about your new film, Night Night. But I suppose before we get into that directly, how would you how would you say you first started acting, and what inspired you to pursue it as a career?
I started acting. I've been acting for a bit of time now. I think the very first time I did, I was about 13 years old. And I
Okay.
grew up in Orange County, so the proximity to Los Angeles, sort of Los Angeles, New York, London are big hubs of entertainment. So just by
Mm,
living close to it, it was a job that was possible that I don't think um, as many other people have sort of that possibility so close to them. And I had a friend that had been working in it a little bit, and I went along to a commercial shoot with him because they needed a handful of younger kids, and we just went because there was an amusement park and they were keeping it open for us. So
mm,
uh, we went to it, and the director kind of pulled me aside during the shoot and was like, "Hey, I see some potential here. Would you want to meet with some agents?" Because I didn't have an agent at the time or anything.
okay.
And I met with some agents, and then from there I just jumped into some acting classes. And
Mm,
once I saw that this was a potential job, like you could go to work and play pretend, and you could use that tool of curiosity and observation for a job,
mm,
I didn't
mm.
think I never turned back. Sort of that was something I fell in love with, and I've been in love with since.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, just kind of speaking as someone, I mean, not just outside of like California, but outside, your continent, that would, it was growing up where you grew up, like saying, I want to be an actor, kind of slightly more like of an achievable goal than say someone who's like on the other side of the country, or would you say it's more complicated than that?
I, I think there's a balance too. I think yes, initially for sure, because there wasn't too much risk. I was able to drive to
Yeah.
auditions into meetings, and I was able to kind of drive up to Los Angeles for acting class every single night. Whereas if
Mm,
you were somewhere else where there wasn't as much of a hub around entertainment, that might be more difficult. But that's not to say that
mm,
you can't do it, because I also have a handful of friends that are from different parts of the states, but
yeah.
also different parts of the world, who just sacrificed more and went for it, and their careers are flourishing. And I think that's also very cool.
Mm. Yeah, and I suppose without giving too much away, like how would you describe the premise of Night Night? Like I suppose like set it up for anyone who hasn't heard about it yet.
Yeah, Night Night is a psychological thriller
Mm,
based around this protagonist, April Davis, who's played by Breanna D'Amico. And
mm,
there's a romance that kind of dovetails with the thriller aspect of it. And there are some twists and turns, which I won't give away,
yeah.
that sort of follow the misdirect of what is happening through this budding romance through the film. And I play Jax Davis, who is April's brother.
Mm,
And we had a kind of difficult family life, so we're all each other has. And Jax is a bit of a hedonist, Epicurean like figure
mm,
who he indulges in the finer parts of life. And for him, I think his biggest concern is uh, who he's going to be with that night, and what
yeah.
fun stimulants he can get his hands on.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, as I was mentioning before we started the recording, I spoke to your co-star Nick Marini, and something that Nick kind of said is that obviously, this kind of genre is already got a lot of films being made for it. But something that Nick said is that he thinks it's more of a grounded, like it's kind of less heady was the word he used. Like, would you kind of agree with what he's going with there, or what he's talking about?
I would. I know what he's talking about, because the thriller genre has just gotten bigger and bigger as
Yeah.
time has gone on. I think right now it's at the biggest it's ever been, and there's so many great films in that genre, but
Mm,
they some sort of transcend it into a psychological place where there will be such big themes and motifs that sometimes are very heady, whereas this film is a bit more grounded. There still are the psychological aspects of
mm,
what is going on, and the objectives, and also the reasons behind some of the antics of characters, but at the same time, it definitely is more grounded than some other thrillers.
Yeah, and you kind of really touched on your character a few moments ago there, but how would you say then he's different to like your previous roles that you've done in the past?
I think that was part of what drew me to the character as well, was
Mm,
that it was a little different than some other characters I've played. And
yeah.
speaking to what we were talking about earlier, I started acting fairly young. So
Mm,
looking at different characters I've played, it's sort of run the gamut of, like, I was on a Nickelodeon show, so that was kind of a
right.
straight-laced straight man, right, in a
Mm,
sitcom. And
yeah.
then there was I played like a professional athlete in a film recently, and then I was a Jedi on Star Wars. So all
Yeah.
the characters are a bit different. And
Hmm.
so I think this Jackson Night Night is fun because, like, I'm wearing big furs often, and there's a little less empathy in the character. But you still, I think the task with a character like that is to get people to see why he is that way and actually care for them and understand him, even though he might not be the most, uh, let's just say, likable character.
Mm. Yeah, and I don't know about you personally. I know when I spoke to Nick, he had a bit of an unusual route into being in the film, but like, was it an audition for you, or like, were you offered this part? Like, how did you come up to be in the film?
Yeah, we have a similar agent, Nikki and I,
Yeah,
or we did
director
at the
cost. Yeah.
time. Yeah, and so I think there was a thing where there were some tape requests within the agency, and
Mm.
then I believe they sent me a tape for the other role, for Nick's role, funny enough,
Yeah,
and I think Nick actually read for Jax,
which
is
is
how
what
I
he said. Yeah, he said read for a different part. Yeah.
yeah, and so when I got that, I don't know why I felt more of a connection. And I think what I was speaking to earlier, like, I was more drawn to that character, Jax. And I think
Mm.
I don't believe I ever ended up taping the other role. I just taped Jax and I sent it in to them. And I think the funny thing I did was, because they didn't send me the Jax sides, I
Okay.
actually taped random Jax scenes that I saw.
Mm.
And then I think they wrote back and they're like, here are the actual sides. We like this idea. Why don't you go ahead and read what everyone else is reading? And so I read those, and then
Mm.
next thing I knew, I think a couple weeks later, I was in Texas.
Yeah. Yeah, then I suppose then like once you were cast in the film, like what made you excited to be doing the project? Like maybe the script or who you'd be working with, like just kind of what kind of geared you up for it?
Um, I think everything from who was involved. I was really
Mm,
excited to work with Nikki, a
yeah.
younger female director who I know is very artistic and was going to take some creative liberties, which was going to be fun.
Mm,
The role was very cool to me. Shooting in Texas, I'd been to Texas before, but only to the major cities. I'd never been to where we shot, which was Corsicana, which is a very, very
okay.
small town in Texas. So it was fun to kind of dive into that world. And then also, I haven't really done, I think I'd only done really one thriller before this. I hadn't
Mm,
jumped into this genre too much. So I was also excited to kind of explore that whole world.
yeah, and obviously you mentioned well a few times already Niki Koss, who directed this, and obviously as well as this is a directorial debut, I think, or at least a
Hmm.
feature length debut.
Yeah.
But obviously, like I guess her day job, so to speak, is that she's also she acts, like she's an actress, and like how was kind of that experience of being directed by a fellow actor?
It was great. It was great because, like you said, she is an actress as well. And so
Mm,
we actually had mutual friend. We didn't know this at the time. We had never
yeah.
met before, but when we got on set, we played that game of who do we know, and we
Mm,
have a handful of mutual friends. One of my good buddies was on a show that she was on, and so somehow we just been kind of passing like ships in the night. We hadn't actually met, but
right.
it was nice to go in and have. I'm trying to think if I've been directed by an actor before. I have, and there's something nice about it in that there's a shorthand and a sort of understanding of what you're attempting in different scenes. And so
Mm,
she understood how an actor would be approaching a scene. And so I think that direction became very clear and concise. And there is a funny little story.
mm,
My first scene, so we got in, Nick and I were on the same flight. Nick
right.
Marini, another actor, same flight into Texas. So we arrived there together. I remember he came up to me in the airport and he was like, "Hey man, I think I saw that we're both in this film." And then we just hit it off and we were fast friends from then on.
Mm.
But we both went to set the next day, and he had a scene before. His first scene was probably in the afternoon. And I think my first scene was that evening. And so they were wrapping up their scene. And Nikki at lunch that day, I'm going to butcher this. I don't know exactly what it was because I got there late, but she got some
Yeah.
sort of food poisoning or something of the sort.
Yeah. Nick told me the story. She's gluten intolerant and she had gluten, which is
Okay,
what
so
happened.
it was gluten. And
Yeah.
so she, luckily and almost serendipitously, we were shooting at a hospital. And
Hmm.
so she was actually taken to another wing of the hospital while she was directing. They
Yeah.
brought a monitor in. And so when I got to set, normally, like, first thing you do, you meet the director, you kind of have a conversation about what your vision is with the role and how you want to kind of go forward with it.
Sure.
And she wasn't there for it.
Yeah.
So first scene, like, well, we're not gonna. They're talking about pushing the scene, but they're like, we got to get it. So we
Yeah.
go to shoot the scene, and the first thing I hear from Nikki is just over the radio, which
Mm.
was really funny. But then she was a real trooper. I remember she came in, they brought her in on a wheelchair, and then she started to gain some steam and momentum as the night went on. And I think whatever they had given her helped her with the gluten intolerance.
Yeah, no, I mean for sure. Like I know when in Nick's telling of that story, he kind of talked about the irony of apparently she was directing him from a hospital bed while he was filming in a fake hospital or something like that. So just but
That's
I mean
exactly right.
it's funny to hear a different perspective on that same story though. It's always very interesting to hear different sides for
Yeah.
sure. So I suppose obviously because you mentioned that you obviously voiced Ezra Bridger on Star Wars Rebels, and I suppose obviously like, how impactful was it for you to be in that expansive Star Wars universe, and as you said, to have actually played a Jedi?
I mean, it was unbelievable, and I'm forever kind of grateful for that opportunity because it
Mm.
was so fun. And the show was, I didn't realize, and this might just be my own naivete, I didn't realize how expansive Star Wars is and how
Yeah.
international
Mm.
and how global the audience is basically. And so
Mm.
when we first started doing it, it was the first animated show that I had ever done. So
Okay.
jumping in, I think there was a learning curve for sure to understand, like, oh, you don't have all the faculties that you have on set or on stage.
Mm.
You're just using your voice. So it was really great training just for kind of funneling all the emotion and everything you have into one specific tool.
Mm.
But yeah, I mean, playing a Jedi, that's every kid's
Yeah.
dream as well. So
Absolutely.
it was such a cool development of a character to go from this young cavalier street kid who
Mm.
has this innate ability to a Padawan to a formidable Jedi. And so I just had such a fun time with that. And that show brought me to a lot of places like the UK for
Right.
conventions and different countries because the show was so global, and it was really cool to see the impact it had and the sort of the waves it created.
Yeah, and maybe it might depend on the actor and depend on the project. But obviously, how often would you get connected back to that character? Because if it was only voiceover, obviously it wouldn't be your face to put to the character, so to speak.
Sorry, like
Yeah,
what? Sorry, what?
I mean, obviously, someone like Mark Hamill, who was like on camera, you recognize his face. But obviously, it was only your voice for Ezra. So, like, with people, how often do people kind of connect you to Ezra because it was only your voice when you were playing him?
Oh, I see.
Yeah,
Well, obviously not on the street walking by, you would have no idea
exactly. Yeah,
unless you were a sort of devout Star Wars fan where you've been watching interviews and like Rebels recons, and
yeah,
because on StarWars.com you would obviously see a lot of the different press that we would do. So there were people, just not nearly as much as people who obviously their face was the
yeah.
character. And so when you go to a convention, people at the convention, that's a sort of captive audience that definitely has seen it. So
Mm.
they know walking around. But I would say day to day on the street, people would recognize you from other characters I played before Ezra. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of like hear stories of like, I mean, if you're in a situation where you're using your voice, like maybe like ordering something, like people ever pick up on it that way, if all they can hear is your voice. Has that ever happened?
I'm trying to think that it happens with young kids, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Where kids watch the show, and their minds, while they're still impressionable and formative, they haven't yet like figured out, oh, that anime character is actually a person. And
Yeah.
so when sometimes someone who's a young kid has watched the show for its entirety, and often multiple times, when they hear it, something clicks in them and like, I know that voice, but you're not him.
Yeah.
This guy is him. And so that's
What's
always
wrong?
a sort of
Yeah.
sweet thing.
Absolutely. And I suppose, obviously, kind of to compare Night Night and a show like that went on for multiple seasons, have you got a preference in how long you stay with a character? Like, would you prefer to kind of be in and out, or like stay with them over an extended period of time?
I think the development of any character is what you're hoping for, and like
Yeah.
you bring that backstory and that level of depth to every character. And so while Night Night may just be an hour and a half film,
Yeah.
and we only see each character for X amount of time, there still is that amount of preparation that you would do for a character that you're going to play for 5 seasons. But that development is really cool. And the TV shows that I've done prior, the live action shows, aside from Rebels, they all have been canceled before season 3. So it's like I've been able to develop it a bit, but you know where that character is going, and then the show's ended, and so you're like, oh well, I guess that happened. So that was the one fun thing about Rebels, was I'd never done, I don't know if that was 4 or 5 seasons, but it was nearly 100 episodes, and I had never done 100 episodes of a show before. So it was cool to track the development of a character, because Ezra definitely went through a sort of roller coaster of character development and growth.
Absolutely, yeah. And I mean, it kind of goes without saying that acting in general is quite competitive to get into. And obviously, unfortunately, not everyone who wants to pursue a career in acting makes it, which is a sad reality. But what do you think people should be more aware of before jumping in head first and like trying to make something out of it?
I think you kind of hit the nail on the head. It is so competitive, but so many different occupations are competitive now. And I think that's a byproduct of just the world that we're in. But at the same time, I think the best advice is probably not taking no for an answer, or at least not taking no personally, because the amount of rejection I faced in my teenage years, I know we see in stories all the time, like the boy is rejected by the girl, or by a friend, or by the coach, or by the guy he likes, or whoever it might be, right? And that is devastating. But then when you look at a young actor, it doesn't even compare. Like I remember thinking at school, when like something negative happened, I'd be like, oh well, I've heard no 4 times this week about jobs that I really wanted. You know what I mean? And so I think if you start to, and it's hard not to take those no's personally, they can kind of weigh on you, and you believe, oh, they don't like me, they don't want me, I'm not good enough for this. But oftentimes it's just you didn't fit that character, yet there will be another character that you fit so well, and you just have to be able to be ready when that opportunity comes, that your preparation is there and you can knock it out of the park. But I would say that the biggest thing is just never turning it down. You take someone like Han Solo, Harrison Ford, right? Harrison Ford, he really didn't pop off in his career until much later. He
was
had
a carpenter, wasn't he? Something like that.
Yeah, he was. He had a decade of no's and rejection, but he just kept going. And I mean, now he's one of the most iconic actors ever.
Absolutely, yeah. And you've actually kind of brought a really interesting angle to that topic, in that obviously you have the idea of like young actors, but also, the young people who'd be insecure anyway, and that, maybe that's why some kind of might, kind of go off the rails a little bit, because, the rejection or the insecurity they might already be facing, coupled with what they might be going through with this industry, can be quite destructive. I mean, just looking at it from an outside perspective, would you agree with that?
Yeah, I definitely would. And I think we've seen some cases, some pretty well-known cases. And unfortunately and fortunately, it's a two-sided, it is two-sided, that like it's good. So part of the beauty is that a lot of people see what is going on, and your occupation, your entertainment is enjoyed by many, but at the same time, the negative things are also seen by many. And so we're all too familiar with the stories of like younger actors who couldn't balance exactly what you're speaking on, the sort of rejection with the extremes of fame and whatever it
Yeah.
might be, and it can definitely weigh on you, because at the end of the day, we're all just people giving it our best shot. And I
Mm.
think sometimes we forget that a bit. We forget to kind of put ourselves in other people's shoes, because everyone's going through whatever different battle they may be going through.
Yeah. I mean, would you say then you've got the kind of perspective, like if someone reached out to you saying, I want to pursue a career in acting, would you kind of be more like, well, if you can do something else, go and do that because it's tough, and kind of like be real with them, or kind of say, well, yeah, absolutely, go for it. It's great if you can make it, and just try and have fun with it. Like, but would you be kind of more realistic with them, or try and like build them up?
I would always be realistic with someone. I guess the only question that would be determining of how I would respond would just be like, is this what you love to do? Because if you don't
Yeah.
love to do it, then I would suggest go do what you love to do. Because at the end of the day, you have to just kind of pursue what you care about. Because I mean, this
Mm.
transcends acting. You're gonna hear. My dad actually had this conversation with me right before university, where
Right.
I took a break for school, but he was like, "Look, you've worked a lot in this industry and you have a career ahead of you. Do you love this that much?" And I was kind of leaning towards just going to school and maybe taking a
Mm.
break. And he was like, "I see how much you love it." And he was like, "You're gonna face rejection in anything you do. And so if it's a job that you don't necessarily love, when you get told no, you're gonna be like, what the hell? Like this isn't even what I love to do." Whereas with acting, he's like, "I've seen you numerous times. You get knocked down, but you get right back up the next day because you love it." And so if someone loves acting and loves the theater and playing characters and portraying
Mm.
other people, then I would for sure encourage that and just say, don't let the no's kind of stop you, and just keep following your passion and keep studying, keep focusing on what your objective is, and you'll achieve it.
Yeah. And I mean, anyone who I think that's good advice. As you say, not even just in acting, just overall. I think that's definitely very, very helpful, very insightful to hear, for sure. But I suppose, kind of like for you personally, like what do you hope to accomplish in the coming months or as we head into 2022?
That's a great question. It's something I try to ask myself often enough. It's for me, personally, I think we're all sort of feeling the effects of the last year and a half of the state of affairs of the world, where
Mm.
it really helps you sort of take a step back and separate job from self, and your
Yeah.
identity is like, we're all just hoping to be able to go out and be around other people, and not have to worry about in the back of our mind who it might be affecting if we got sick or whatever that might be. And
Mm.
I think that's just really weighed on a lot of people, the different the different ways we've had to change our lives in the last year and a half. So I think I'm just focused on like maintaining um, a stable mental health and happiness
Mm.
and well-being, and seeing my friends and supporting everyone around me. And then in a career sense, weirdly, I worked on 3 films during 2020, and so
Okay.
it was a strange time with the world, but also I was kind of busy working for a bit of it, and so they're
Mm.
starting to come out. So I was just in Toronto this last month for a film that premiered at TIFF, and that will be coming out. And then this film's coming out, and then I have another film coming out towards the top of the year. So it's sort of um, it's sort of revisiting different times of our lives in these little capsules that we shot. And so
Yeah.
I think my main objective is to just continue to enjoy and find the perspective in each day.
Yeah, absolutely. That was actually all the questions I had prepared for this. So just me, to
Awesome.
wrap this up, yeah, just to say thanks again for taking the time, and best of luck with everything going forward. All the best, and stay safe. Take care.
Thank you so much. It was so great talking to you, Connor.